Right, we are here and we are live. Live TV, folks. Let's see, it's June 12th. We are the Built Environment Council Committee, and I'm joined by Councilmember Zarlingo and Councilmember Bader and myself, Councilmember Vogely. I think we get to read these disclosures. The public is welcome to attend in person or remotely. There will be no public comment during committee meetings. To watch remotely, you can call in or listen at those places that I'm not going to read out loud because maybe you'll find it online, and if you are already watching, you know. So I guess right away we have York Stevens Wajda and I can't remember your name. Alisanne Wetzel to tell us about the comprehensive plan periodic update. Maybe if we're lucky.
So we've been talking to you over the last year plus about the comprehensive plan update. At your last meeting, we did a speed dating session at the end of the meeting over the changes that are coming with the different alternatives that have been massaged over the last year to meet the needs that of the numbers that we have been given by Puget Sound Regional Council for 70,000 additional residents, 35,000 additional dwelling units that are going to be needed for those residents, and or 21,000 new housing units. So we are here to answer questions regarding what we gave you during the speed dating, to go over a little bit of who we've been talking to this spring. So we have been to the Lowell neighborhood, the Glacier View neighborhood, the Port Gardner neighborhood, the Northwest neighborhood, the somebody down in Southwest. Westmont Holly. And yes, and then we also went to another one in Southwest, the day of the traffic palooza.
Yes.
So I can't remember what that one was, and I apologize to the residents of that neighborhood for not remembering who. I remember you, I just don't remember the name of the place. So we have been talking, we've gotten good feedback from everybody. I would say no one's hair is on fire at this point, that we are not going in the right direction, that they are understanding why we're going where we're going, what it means for their neighborhoods. There's been some confusion, especially when it regards to middle housing and the changes with middle housing. But for the most part, we are having good conversations with people. So I brought the maps so that we can go through them if you would like, because I know we did the speed dating session, and answer any of your questions for that. The other thing I have brought is, as we are preparing to put the information together, is how we are going to put the plan together. So I have been pulling together vision statements and element scopes for the plan. And what I have done is go back to literally of things that were done in the 1990s. Of vision statements for Everett. So I've looked at your mission statement, I've looked at Mayor Franklin's State of the City Vision in 2019, One Everett, Envision Everett 2037, Everett 2000, Vision Goals and Actions. This is a really wonderful one from 1990. It is so dated that the graphics are stickers in here. So, but what we are doing is looking at what the community has wanted for all of the city and for the different elements. I've also looked at other organizations once, because we are required to be in alignment with Puget Sound Vision 2050, Snohomish County 2020, the PUDs, the Port of Everett, the U.S. Navy's Naval Air Station. So we've looked at all of them and gone through and created visions, statements for overarching what the plan is, which is the Everett 2044 in the top line, and then additional information on what the element will contain, what the scope of the work is for the element, and then for each of the different elements, what the vision is for getting there. So we can go in whatever direction you would like. If you want questions, to answer questions on maps, I'm more than happy to start there. I'm more than happy to start with where we're seeing the plan document starting to go.
Thank you very much. This is super, I don't know if it's exciting, but looks like it's gonna be fun to read. I can't read and talk at the same time unless
That's
I'm
okay.
reading what I'm talking. Do my fellow council members have a question right off the bat?
Well, I have one right off the bat. Actually, I'm assembling lots of questions on this, and I
Okay.
do think that the people that come to our neighborhood meetings are some of the most well-informed, and I feel like there's a wide range out there of people who don't, I don't think they have internalized how growth is managed, what we are compelled to do, the state mandates. But in terms of, so I'm trying to learn all I can, and will be doing my own outreach with constituents and anybody else I run into in the meantime. But there are things that, kind of one macro question I've been meaning to ask. Some of the stuff we're talking about, because of the irregular boundaries of the city, there will be various versions of high-rise right at the edges of the city limits. And that is right up against then county that would otherwise, if it doesn't get changed, be single family, 28 feet maximum, something like that. So that could be 15 or 25 or 40 floors. So I'm wondering about how does this all get reconciled with the county efforts, so that we don't inadvertently end up with discontinuities or funny steps or stuff that looks like we were not paying attention.
Oops, sorry.
I just asked for alternative 2, which is the one that would be more likely to have those sorts of adjacencies. And I see a couple of strips along Evergreen Way and along 19th where we have the high-rise zoning. That might actually be common to both of the alternatives because it's the urban corridor geography, which is high-rise in both. It's a matter of how high between the two alternatives.
Did you just say you see like 2 places within the city of Everett that could happen?
I see 2 places where high-rise abuts the edge of the jurisdiction.
Okay, and that was where again?
Along 19th,
It's Costco?
near Silver Lake, Costco, as well as around 106th, the low
Yes.
100s.
Yeah.
And then Evergreen Way in the 105th and down to 119th.
Yeah, that's probably the most, that's probably the strongest example. Then there'll be other ones where it is mid-rise, which was 7 floors, I think. And again, so that's next to some areas that are currently single-family in the county. So that's just one of the things I know we'll be working out, but I did want to see if I could get a sense of how this is working out with the county.
Yeah. We probably owe some coordination with the county. We've had meetings over the course of the project with them. The county is making changes on their side of the boundary, coinciding with the urban light rail communities, urban core sub-area plan that they're working on. We have some areas within the city of Everett where there are adjacencies of higher heights, lower heights. High-rise to single-family is a more abrupt change than having this kind of a stair step down from high-rise to mid-rise to single-family, which is most commonly how we've arranged it in these alternatives. Somebody recently, it may have been Mayor Franklin, was asking for something similar. It might have been someone on the council to provide a map that overlays the two. And we have different zones mean different things and they're different color schemes. So there's a little bit of processing there. I think we did create that just recently. I don't remember really looking at it closely myself, but that's something that we can share with the council and take a close look as well. With all of these transitions, we currently have some regulations in our Heights chapter about adjacencies and about, regardless of the zone, that, for instance, if you're adjacent to a single family zone right now, the height is lowered from what it would otherwise be within, I think, 50 feet of the edge of the zone. So even if your height limit in the current zoning system is 7 floors, you wouldn't be able to use all of that height within 50 feet of a single-family zone. I'm not exactly sure how that interacts if the single-family zone is outside the city, whether we would recognize that a single-family zone in Snohomish County would lower the development potential on a higher intensity zone within Everett. But then B, we have choices on how to maintain, change, or otherwise with those sorts of regulations. So we can either do it with the map, we can do it with some of those kind of overlay regulations.
Guess that was part of my question is, will we have the ability to have some finer granularity in that? There's a place that I'm thinking of as an example that is actually in the county. It's near the Lowe's on 132nd Street. I forget what state highway that is. There's a large apartment complex there, and the northern part of that is built up. The base elevation is built up about 1 story from there, and then there's 3 stories plus a peaked roof, and that's right next to single-family housing. And that abrupt change is the kind of thing that I think people are going to ask about, people are going to be sensitive to, and indeed is a real shock to people. So I guess that's what I'm beginning to dig into myself, is how can we implement this, if appropriate, in a finer fashion so that we don't essentially accidentally do things or in an unaware fashion. So I guess that is a question then is, can the comprehensive plan and the subsequent zoning, can it handle that kind of thing?
It can. While you were talking, I thought of one other way that these adjacencies and transitions can happen, and that is in time. If some of these areas that are designated mid-rise, low-rise, high-rise are currently dominated by single-family houses, and so if one part of the block develops, then that building is going to be next to a house. But someday, presumably, that house would also develop. So if you are requiring some reduction in bulk, then once the next door neighbor builds, then you've kind of lost the value in 2 ways. So just another thing to think about there. The planning department took a tour this morning, today, of some light rail station areas and a neighborhood that transitioned in the past 20 years. There are blocks that were nothing but houses and are now apartment buildings. About 7 stories high was the average height. So we walked the blocks, and there were 2 apartment buildings. Actually, there was a couple houses, legacy houses with apartment buildings on either side and then on the back. And we spent quite some time discussing kind of how it would feel, and I think the general consensus was that it would be very different. It'd be a different kind of a feel in that, I mean, that's surrounded versus just being on one edge, but that it wasn't necessarily terrible. Now that may differ by people, by setting, by preferences, but it is going to be hard to avoid all adjacencies of taller buildings and shorter buildings, I guess.
Yeah,
But something that we can look at.
That's a good point. I guess I see the distinction that you're making there, and I think the challenge is going to be to do that intelligently. You don't want to lock in poor or highly suboptimal land use, but you also want to recognize that these areas will evolve over decades. We will do at least a few more of these comprehensive plans by the time that those things go. So I guess what I'm expecting to look at is more detail in that, and probably more geographic detail, and expect that some of it will be a shock, but we don't want to have a shock or a transition or stuff that's worse than it, in terms of impact, than it needs to be.
I am really loud. Am looking at urban form on our new sheet. Urban form is about how the city decides where to permit different land uses and the buildings too for those uses. My question is, okay, so we are creating this comprehensive plan called 2044, and a lot of things are changing. That's just how it is, and how they do is up to everybody. When it comes to permitting right now, and let's see, there's still going to be room for, oh, it's not when it comes to permitting. When it comes to zoning, there's still going to be room for rezones and this and that. How does it, are there rezones still happening currently as we're doing this? And or not? Or are you telling folks to wait because this will be done in a year? And yeah, go from there.
The answer is yes,
Yes,
to both.
we're doing them now, we'll be doing them later.
Yes. So there are certain ones that are in the pipeline that are going to be done, and new ones coming in as of this week. So that those will be continued to be done. It just depends on some of it. Others, we are saying, yes, please wait. It's part of the plan.
I've noticed a lot of construction going on right down there at 4th and Evergreen and 105th and all of that stuff.
But the relevance of the comprehensive plan is the rezones have to be consistent with the comp plan.
Right.
Say that again?
The relevance of the comprehensive plan that we're talking about is that rezones, although they can occur at any time, do have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, yes. And so with the current comprehensive plan or the future comprehensive plan?
Whatever is in effect at the time they apply for the
Okay,
rezone.
so it's ever in effect. And that typically goes through planning department, and it doesn't usually, unless it's like the park district that we're gonna be talking about, that is quite large. The permit,
They
I mean,
all-
sorry, the rezoning
All
goes through.
rezonings go through the planning department and then planning commission and then on to you.
So all rezones through the city
All
council. Yeah.
rezones go through the city council.
Yeah. So a
I
little
don't
bit
want you
of,
to feel left out.
It's just been decided before it gets to us.
so a
Okay,
little bit of background on rezones, because I think that's an important one, as David said, the rezones implement the comprehensive plan. The relationship between the two is a little bit general to specific, so the comprehensive plan is general, it might say mid-rise. We may have, well, currently we have commercial mixed use is a designation in the comprehensive plan. There are 2 implementing zones for that, mixed urban and business. There may be some others as well. You can rezone within that list of implementing zones at any time without changing the comprehensive plan. If you wanted to go beyond what that general umbrella is for a designation, you'd have to change the comprehensive plan. That's much more difficult.
and that happens once a year,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah. So we do process rezones. They can be initiated by the city council, by administration, by property owners. The most recent one that we've processed was at 75th and Hardison. It was a very small single parcel to commercial from industrial, I think, and there's a Taco Bell there now and a gas station.
oh yeah.
This comprehensive plan periodic update includes a full city rezone. So it is the development regulations, which include the zones and the map, as well as the regulations that implement them, including the things like the transitions and the adjacencies. So we will be updating the entire comprehensive plan map as well as the zoning map. Subsequent to that, folks will be able to continue to request, whoever it is, rezones. We also ran a process of specific amendment requests. You'll remember from about a year ago where we got applications from folks around the city to rezone or change the comprehensive plan designation for their properties. Those continue to be in play. They are, I think, all of them overlap with changes that are already in the comprehensive plan. So what we've told those requesters is that just watch this process, and if in the preferred alternative, what you were hoping for is not there, then you'll want to engage in it. But if it is there, then you've succeeded and you'll receive that rezone. So annual and other rezones, big rezone, and then the specific amendments are kind of the three angles there.
Go for it, yeah.
Can you give a little bit better idea how this process will incorporate the state mandates, the middle housing, 1110, and I guess the ADUs?
Well, ADUs are already included in. They have been permitted already. Middle housing,
We had ADUs, but the state bill mandated more of them on a lot.
We did it all last year. Yep, so the 2 per lot
Oh,
and
yeah, I
some
remember
parking
now.
things. So yeah,
Yep.
we've successfully accomplished that piece already.
so middle housing, we are also working on as part of the plan. This is just some information on it. And, you're welcome. And we are looking at heights, setbacks, lot coverage, number of dwelling units, street facing. That was part of the whole reason we were doing the tour today, was to see how, because where we were had middle housing, it had 7-story units, because the preferred option in Seattle right now is the 2-story podium with the 5 stories above it. That is the preferred option for construction. It's the easiest to get through their planning process and their building permits, and so that is what we are seeing a lot of in Seattle right now. But there were other types of housing units. We had some fourplexes, some duplexes, and I believe we might have had a few townhouses that we went past too. So we were looking at just how does this make a streetscape. So with middle housing, we are able to put middle housing in every one of the dark yellow areas on the map that I've handed you. So
The ones labeled neighborhood residential.
neighborhood residential, yes. There will not be a specific single-family residential under the new middle housing regulations. And that's also what was in the City of Everett's Housing Action Plan that was adopted when?
2021?
Yeah, that's when it was adopted. So.
2021, for those of you who missed the microphone.
So that's already, we are working on what does middle housing look like. We know it is part of the plan. It will be part of urban form, and it will be part of the housing section. It'll also be part of design and development for neighborhoods in here.
And just to put forward again, because I cannot say it often enough, and I don't think people can hear it often enough, we're not telling people to destroy their
No.
single-family homes. We're telling them that people are allowed to build other than single-family,
Yes.
but they can stay
And-
as long as they want.
And that has been a question that we get rather regularly at the neighborhood meetings or at other places where we've been, like Sorticulture, where we will be at Pride this weekend. We have been at other events around the city, because you were asking how are we getting out to other individuals. So that is part of our outreach too. We've been going to the high schools, we've been doing some other places too.
And I'll just add quickly on middle housing, we will bring a dedicated, it's a big enough topic with enough kind of dials to get dialed in correctly that it's deserving of its own agenda item in this committee or with the full council or both probably. We took middle housing to the Planning Commission over the last 2 meetings. Available online, the memos should be informative, the videos rather long, go double speed probably. We went through topic by topic. I think Alisanne mentioned all of them: height, setbacks, lot coverage, parking, and then overarching
frontage.
considerations like environmental critical areas and displacement, housing affordability, and all of those things. So we brought some considerations and what the state's requirements say about it. We heard some of their feedback, and it was all towards, with the goal of developing a first draft of what those regulations are. We have to allow middle housing, but we have a lot of choices about how to allow it, design standards, all those sorts of things. So I'd encourage folks to check in with the planning commission, and that'll be a preview of
Okay.
what we'd bring to the council.
That was one of the things that has come up is design standards, because I know there were some of those things that were, that we had before for things like ADUs that are not allowed in the new legislation. And then also, I guess something for, that deserves some clarification in what used to be called single-family or zoned single-family, now neighborhood housing, that the city will regulate, the city could allow things that are not allowed by homeowners associations. So if there are separate deed agreements or homeowners associations, the state legislation does not mandate any changes in those.
The state mandates that we allow it, but the local, the covenants would prevent it. So effectively, just like nobody is compelled to make any changes to their own property if you've made agreements with your neighbors not to add accessory dwelling units or fences over 4 feet or purple garage doors or whatever, the city lets that be.
Yeah, those are for existing covenants,
Right, new covenants were not allowed
right?
to restrict that, okay.
Correct.
That makes me uncomfortable. Because
It was
covenants-
yeah, I mean, when the legislature passed the middle housing bill, there was lots of conversation and consideration of that. Like CCNRs related to an HOA are like a separate contract. And so the ability for the state to pass a law that would undo that, like, individual party contract was maybe not possible and or maybe too complicated at this point.
It brings me to redlining and racism and all of those wonderful things that we are full
There are
of.
fewer HOAs in our city than you would think, so there's lots of folks that will be able to benefit from some housing options with the potential for these comprehensive plan changes. And moving forward, even today, a new HOA couldn't form with those kind of, and establish those kinds of restrictions, or existing ones can't be like, let's dig in and make some changes, so, yeah.
But there are actually constitutional provisions that deal with what's called impairment of contracts. The government can't step in and invalidate existing contracts, which is, I think, where that comes from.
Except for, racist
Yeah, I think
covenants.
the discriminatory ones were the ones that have already been ruled out, okay.
So there's precedent, we could change it, but not at the city level. So moving on, yes, Councilmember Bader?
Thanks. York, I think last week and maybe you can remind me, like in a thumbnail explanation for the different philosophies that underlie the 3 alternatives.
Alternative 1 is current plans extended, so that's the simplest one. The map you see is a generalization of our existing height map, but it otherwise makes no changes to what we have on the books right now. Alternative 2 is the concentrated alternative, and that meets our growth targets by really doubling down on the existing strategy, which is which avoids changes to single-family neighborhoods and really concentrates the growth capacity downtown and on the urban corridors. So you'll see much higher heights in downtown along the urban corridors and a couple of blocks adjacent to them. The dispersed alternative 3, is a little bit more measured with those increases along the urban corridors and their frames, the areas a couple of blocks on either side, and it balances the lost capacity from that with the middle housing, as well as a designation called connectors, which are the secondary arterials like 19th and Madison and 100th and Mukilteo Boulevard.
And I think it would be useful to add just that these alternatives as concepts are really just a function of the environmental planning process. And so you might look at them as one avenue, but they won't come before you as like, pick one of these 3 alternatives. They won't be alternative 1 because the state said you gotta have middle housing. And they won't really be alternative 2 as it appears before you because of the same reason. There's no middle housing really in alternative 2 in the concentrated one. Will it be like okay, the one has to be alternative 3, not necessarily. There's like lots of nuance around that and where those things really lie, and how much do you pull from concentrated and push into this one that incorporates middle housing? So it'll probably be end up being kind of some sort of fourth,
2+.
right, some kind of other path,
That's
but
a
it
good
won't
point.
be.
The environmental review process under the State Environmental Policy Act, SEPA, requires that you evaluate what's called a range of reasonable alternatives. And so this is the range of reasonable alternatives. It doesn't mean this is a menu, you have to pick 1, 2, or 3, which is what Jennifer just said much more clearly than I did.
And going with that, I'm looking at Metro Everett, and I think I know there's only one Metro Everett, but is there only one of that dark brown? So that's the Metro Everett is the only place right now on this particular map that could have 25 floors. We're just waiting for it to happen. During the comprehensive plan, might that be one of those things that is malleable, movable, around the city to make it somewhere else 25 floors?
I think alternative 2 has 25 floors for the urban corridors, and it's 15 floors for alternative 3. There is a Metro core, the darkest brown, that is up to 40 floors in alternative 2. There is some aspect of what we've studied, the highest designation for any given property is kind of the highest we can go without doing additional environmental review. And I might glance to my left here. So if we were to take an area that in none of our alternatives that we study in the EIS and say that we need to go to 40 floors, we may need to go back and review that with a supplemental environmental impact statement. So that's the only qualifier in there, but otherwise it is our discretion.
Environmental impact brings me to, with your, one or two other things. I can see some real challenges in this, in incorporating this, where we also have concerns about lot coverage, stormwater treatment, tree cover. A bunch of those things are going to be a lot trickier.
A lot.
And that becomes, I think, as Mr. Hall stated, that environmental review is going to be a question about that. Is there an overall environmental impact analysis of the likely larger coverage of impervious surfaces, roofs, et cetera?
Yes, we are sharing these alternatives. We hope to have the environmental impact statement ready to share early this summer. We have shared these maps and then the numerical representation of them, numbers on parcels, with our stormwater team, with PUD, with our police and fire, with all of the technical disciplines for their review of what would this future look like? What would be some adverse impacts from this? And how might you mitigate those? And then we would have choices to accept the impacts or implement the mitigations or other. So yes, we are, yes.
I'm guessing that's going to be a pretty hefty EIS. If you want to get a sense of the range of elements of the environment, it's called, that are considered an EIS, I think if you look at WAC 197.11.440, is that, am I getting 400 something? It lists all the elements of the environment, including things like stormwater, et cetera, that need to be covered if it's pertinent for a particular proposal.
Well, and it also, I guess the thing that I'm thinking of in more individual terms is that this middle housing, often single-family housing, especially infill single developments, has not required separate engineered stormwater treatment and that sort of thing. But as we go to more middle housing and denser, then there'll be, I'm not sure what thresholds we have in that, but it sounds to me like that will be needed more often, more engineered solutions, vaults and.
It'll depend on the lot coverage, yes.
And the things that will be looked at in this EIS are going to be more at a kind of programmatic
Yes.
level. When particular developments come in, they will still need, if they reach a certain threshold, they will still need their own environmental review for the more specific impacts of that development.
And I think in that sense, I suspect people typically doing that stuff are familiar with it. Probably the thing that'll be stickier and generate more calls and questions are ADUs, DADUs, maybe duplexes where there was just going to be a single house, where it's small enough and maybe you're on one side or the other of the border you're talking about in terms of the boundary in terms of lot coverage.
One thing I'll add about environmental review and stormwater brings it to mind is that we have regulations in place to protect many aspects of the environment. And I think the environmental impact statements have been getting a little bit less useful over time as we have handled stormwater, for example. Just like a private covenant, you're not getting past the stormwater team with a development that doesn't do right by our creeks and rivers and stormwater system. So they will review, you may not be able to maximize the zoning for that reason or for a number of other reasons. This is saying you can build middle housing, but you're going to need to have the right size lot for it. You're not going to be able to encroach on critical areas in their buffers. In a lot of cases, I think the redevelopment brings benefits to the stormwater system because if a development was done prior to a lot of these regulations, it may have substandard or even failing stormwater systems, so there can be some improvements. But all I wanted to make that connection is that the mitigation aspect to say, whoa, this is going to increase impervious surface, so it'll necessarily impact streams, is already mitigated by our stormwater regulations that are pretty robust, I think.
And over time, as SEPA and the SEPA rules have been amended, fewer and fewer things have to be independently evaluated through SEPA because there have been amendments that, I guess simply put, say, if you comply with these more detailed development regulations, you don't have to analyze it under SEPA.
Some of the developments that we saw today had very tastefully designed their landscaping as stormwater management systems. I mean, so these beds were built and you could see exactly how the stormwater was being filtered through them.
And we're,
Slightly similar to the rain gardens that are being done.
Absolutely.
Some of it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
that's what I was gonna say, ish. Yes?
Can you connect the alternative one, high-rise, mid-rise, low-rise with 2 and 3 light? So right now, what does high-rise mean? What does mid-rise mean? What does low-rise in terms of stories?
Oh, yeah.
Low rise is 4, mid rise is 7, and high rise is above that. 7 is the podium construction, 2 stories of, yeah.
Okay. And then another question, I was kind of surprised because I think a lot of this is connected with transit especially, that there was no difference between being within a certain distance of a Swift stop or high-capacity transit versus anywhere else along Evergreen Way, for instance. And what's the rationale between that? Because I thought there was supposed to be some connection between the ability to accommodate that.
Yes, we took a relatively consistent approach to the corridors, roughly 2 blocks off for the frames. And in some cases, that's going to be a pretty far walk to the Swift stops. Swift stops have longer stop spacing so that they can keep the speeds up and everything. Overall, the adjacency to services remains. Whether there's transit or not, you're very likely to have shops, restaurants, and all of other things. So Evergreen Way, our economic development director likes to call it them amenity corridors. They're also efficient for transportation in terms of driving, that it's direct access onto our main arterial system and all that. We can look at some of those details, and there may be some locations that are relatively far from transit as well as services. But that was our approach, to not go with just the kind of circles around light rail, but to consider, or not light rail, but bus rapid transit, but to consider the overall amenities that are brought by the corridors.
I think that is it the 7 that goes down Evergreen?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, because we did look at it, because the legislature was looking at some different transit-oriented development regulations, and if you combine the 7 stops with the Swift stops, it's it covers a lot of the city. So I think even if we kind of went back and just looked at those radiuses, I'll say, radii, I don't know, around the bus stops, it does kind of cover it if you think about how they're spaced out. But yeah, that is a good question about, and, because it's also related to middle housing, because that is supposed to be in walkable neighborhoods with probably less parking and different access to transit and biking and things like that. And some of it'll be that transition like Yorick talked about, like after you guys make these decisions in 9 months-ish, the city will change over time, but, actually
But
it's
it
really
does
funny
seem
to look
to,
at this.
it does seem to argue for taking a look after the base has been done, to take a more intensive look at a radius around those areas and to see if there's a rise there that can be supported by bus rapid transit, especially maybe by the light rail as well, because that's also the EIS is underway on that right now. That might reduce the pressure elsewhere in a place where it can be better accommodated. Again, just kind of a weighting on the overall alternative that's chosen.
And one other comment, I like obviously the goal of kind of tearing down. I guess I'm a little concerned with those places where it doesn't tear down so well. A couple places where it looks like we have either 15 or whatever it is on the option 2, right up against mid-rise or excuse me, up against neighborhood residential, or even 7, and doesn't tear down to 4, and then there. So just a little concerned about those lack of transitions, I guess. So just wanted to
Yeah,
voice that.
some of those in alternative too, I think we do have mid-rise along the whole, so it steps down from high-rise, mid-rise, and then neighborhood residential. I think all of the transitions are at least at a street center line, so you would have one side of the street would be taller buildings, and then the other side of the street would be shorter buildings. The 80 feet of, 60 feet, 80 feet of right-of-way helps with that transition, but you're right, there may be some areas. Topography, I think Allison keeps reminding and wanting to put this on LiDAR and everything, and thinking of how topography makes a difference, because sometimes
Yeah.
that'll help, and sometimes it'll opposite of help.
As we saw in the southwest corner of Pacific and Rucker several years ago.
Yes.
And that question about feet, it reminds me when it popped up as you were talking about the 50-foot. If you're saying there has to be not sure exactly, I can't recall exactly what you said about the 50-foot step, but where does that 50 feet start? Middle of the right-of-way, the middle, or the edge of the property line?
From I think it's, let me do my best here, 50 feet from a single-family property. So it would start at the property line, not the right-of-way. The height is limited, I think, all the way down to 28 feet. So if it's across the street, there will be a relatively thin strip, or if it's an alley, it's halfway there. If they're directly adjacent, it can take up an entire property of your side lot neighbor, if that's where the transition is.
Thanks.
Public facilities and services. Everett has sustainable and resilient public facilities and services is the vision. And the element describes how the city and its partner agencies plan to provide for facilities, services, and utilities to meet the needs of our growing community. And I'm thinking again of Metro Everett and the amendment that was made at our last plant when it became Metro Everett. Has anybody thought about, of course they've thought about it, has anybody brought up in public about unamending, re-amending the social services aspect of businesses in Metro Everett during this review?
Last element on the next page.
Just throw that anywhere. Hey, healthy? Okay, well then there it is. Talk to me.
Now, specifically to the ground floor
That's the
prohibition
one.
on social services and some clinic-type uses in Metro Everett, that's been a topic of discussion, I think, with this council a few times. I came to Parks Quality and Life committee. Don't get jealous.
Well, I'm in that one too, so maybe
The
that's
Built
why.
Environment Department, but we talked about that, I think, last year. Two council members initiated a change with regard to birthing centers at a recent council
Oh, yeah.
meeting. And that is, the ordinance is going to the planning commission next week. That's not social services, but I'll say that it's a conversation that has happened, and we do not have direction or currently incorporating changes to that in this comprehensive plan.
Noted. And I will say that my daughter's birth certificate says she was born at the birthing center. She was actually born at home, but I know that birthing center. And then can you just remind us the pink? I think, well, the first one doesn't have it on there and it's hard to read all of those things anyways. But the pink sections are other, and then so way up is the college and the hospital on the west of Broadway, and then,
Schools and cemeteries.
oh, is the pink, what's the pink one on the east?
Yeah, maybe
Oh, you don't have
Hawthorne
it over there?
Elementary, or, yeah.
Would it be Hawthorne Elementary? I
It
think
could
they're,
be.
I think you got them all,
That's
schools,
Hawthorne.
hospitals, cemeteries, and
Schools.
schools, and more schools.
And then so also on there,
Oh, no, it's Wazoo Everett.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, they're big buildings.
And then the,
Yeah,
What
it's
do you
not
call that?
Hawthorne.
'Cause it's the Broadway side of the Park District.
You know, that's the wetland, the one next to the Park District. That's the wetland parcel. I'll ask our GIS person for
Yeah,
the
maybe
full
it's-
list. Yeah, but I don't know that Boys and Girls Club should be other because it's not a public school.
and then the Poplar, in between Poplar Street and Maple, up in that area, there's all those lines. Is that what Baker Heights was? It's at the 4, it's got a number 4 in it?
Yep.
Okay. Just curious, I like to orient myself.
We do have maps that
yeah,
are, we do have maps that are north, central, and south that are more deep, or bigger scale, so you can actually see them. Unfortunately, Erica, our GIS person, is at a training in Tacoma right now, and when I realized that that would have been really handy today, this afternoon, it was a little late.
Totally fine.
But we
Totally
can
fine.
get them to you.
Council member, there's a list on the map.
What?
Our GIS person has thought ahead of us. Other, school, hospital, cemetery, and PUD. So,
Well-
but I don't, that doesn't,
Lower left-hand.
Yes.
yeah, bottom left.
On-
But still, that's not what that, I
It
don't,
doesn't say exactly, like, this is Providence.
yeah.
No.
No, not
we-
for each
We don't go to
individual
that
one.
level of detail on these.
Well, you can go to the story map on everettwatt.gov/2044, and then you can zoom right in and see that square that we were looking at is Hawthorne Elementary.
Very good.
Is it Denny?
Maybe it's also Denny. It incorporates,
Oh,
yeah.
Is the story map zoomable?
so the pipeline from.
Oh, okay, I didn't do that. There was one other thing I'm thinking about myself for the first time here in terms of explaining this. For people who don't spend much of their life on this kind of stuff, I think, at least myself, I'm probably gonna wanna take a spot, a zone, a square mile or something, maybe something less than that, and sort of then diagram that specifically about, match that up with the kinds of things that might be there. So when we talk about a podium thing, that's shorthand that we understand, our residents typically do not. If we talk about 5/2 apartments, then they may know what that means. But I'm thinking, at least myself, I'm probably gonna wanna do several of those, just so I'll be able to paint a picture in people's heads of what that
You're
is.
welcome to come upstairs anytime and we can walk through an area.
Good.
Any one of you.
Okay.
Okay. I had to, yeah, I was. I don't know. I just have lost all. I feel like just making noise because nobody else is.
Well,
Let me ask a quick question.
Okay,
Wait,
please
Sorry,
do.
nothing. On 3 at least, what's the difference between being inside or outside growth geography? I mean, I can see like a lot of orange or 4 that's both inside and outside. What does that mean?
Probably, if there's a line around it, I think it's a geography. If there's not, it's existing for.
Okay.
So like on Mukilteo Boulevard and is that Beverly? There's a little cluster that is already, maybe it's neighborhood
Okay.
business and 4 floors.
Considering boundaries between city and county and the possible annexation of property later on down the road and having conversations with the county and the growth management for both of our areas. Is that essentially the same type of conversation that either is lacking or is a little bit that we were talking about at the beginning? Is there a difference? Because maybe it's in the, I can't remember what it's called, but the possible annexation area. The urban growth boundary. That's what you just said, isn't it? Maybe not.
And yeah, that is in the bucket of presumably, my presumption, an annexation would include an interlocal agreement with the county, an annexation to the south. So we would need substantial coordination with them. We have policies, I believe, that discuss annexation, and those are ones that we'll take a look at, and we want to make sure that they're strike the right tone. The county and our countywide planning policies also have policies supporting annexation and also creating some considerations or some limitations on it. So all of the policy framework has been set up since it's a Growth Management Act near requirement that we get along to annexation eventually. The Snohomish County Tomorrow Planning Advisory Committee is picking up annexation at its next meeting. That might be as early as tomorrow. I'll have to check my calendar after this. So that's a venue for staff at that level to discuss annexation. What's your city thinking? I won't have much to report other than it's something that we're looking at and we understand the policy framework around it and the encouragement to do that. I'll see what comes out of that. Potentially that could come to the SCT steering committee. Council members are lingo, right? Yep.
And you were right, Councilmember Vogt. Those are both real things, urban growth area and potential annexation areas, which are generally within the urban growth area.
Okay. So it's not one and, okay, thank you.
They're both real.
They're both real and,
And
but they're not
overlap.
exactly the same. They
Not
just
exactly
fit
the same.
together real nice.
Exactly.
Like a best friend pendant.
Yeah, you annex the urban growth area that's assigned to your city, but you don't have to annex the whole thing at once. So that's kind of maybe part of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, the city has been annexed at least 5 times. Mine and, my area in 77, I believe. So change occurs and things get bigger and more filled in, everybody. This has not been Everett the whole time Everett has been. Hey. Okay, there's 5 minutes. There can be a quick last chance for questions. Councilmember Bader is okay.
my brain is full.
Cool. Mine's not quite full, just, I'm done with this dish. Yes.
I have one
Sorry.
more thing. On June 28th and 29th, we are having expo/open houses on the 28th, it's at Everett Station Warehouser Room, and on the 29th, we are back at the Evergreen Branch Library again.
Yes.
So, I've got enough for you and for your fellow council members so that you can let your constituents know that that is what is occurring, and people that might not come out to community meetings could also attend. It's on our website, and we will have Sound Transit there. We will have Everett Transit there. The Parks Department will be there, and transportation.
Sound
Public Works.
Transit, I believe, will be
That's-
there.
that was my
Did you
first
say
one.
that? Okay, our own transportation staff as well. and
Yeah.
Great opportunity to get questions answered by subject matter experts.
I love subject matter experts. Well, I mean, I could really push it. I just wanted to mention again, Everett Mall Way traffic calming, because it's a pending item, and because we have a new business coming in that was here last week to tell us about it. Okay, it wasn't that business, but it's the event place. So anyways, I just am putting it out there again I know that we've talked about it a lot and we want it. And driving is driving, and
Well, and the comprehensive plan's a good time, we can look ahead at what the plan is going to be doing for that and the changes and think, okay, now how does that match up? So somebody like Corey Hurt may have useful things for us to tell us about that.
okay, anything else before I adjourn this informative meeting? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned.